All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to the Grappler's Dilemma podcast. I'm your host today, Cody, here with Aaron.
What's up?
How you doing, buddy?
Dude, very well. We just finished a pretty good training session tonight.
Yes.
That was a blast. I've been sick for like a week right after the KCC1 knife control concepts seminar. I got super sick for a full week.
Yeah.
And today was my first day back, dude. And it takes the wind out of your sails a little bit when you're trying to recover after being down and out.
Especially if you never really do any if Jiu-Jitsu is just your cardio.
That's all I do.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
it's
run.
like
These colors don't run, dude.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, that ties into our show topic for today. What episode number is this?
This is episode number 9.
Sick.
We're on episode 9, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
They say that 95 I don't know who that they is, but the statistic is that 95% of people that start a podcast don't make it to episode 10.
To episode 10?
Yeah, they don't make it to
We're
episode
almost
10.
there.
Yeah, so we've almost made it beyond 95% of people that start podcasts.
Well, before we get into our main topic today, which is about strength and conditioning and recovery.
Yes, sir.
We have an intro question. This one is a guest intro question from Eli Knight.
What's going on, guys? It's Aaron with the Grappler's Dilemma. We just finished up with Knife Control Concepts 1 here at Kindred Jiu-Jitsu in Edmond, Washington. I'm here with Eli Knight, who's going to be asking our question of the day.
My question is, what's a hot take on a martial art that you think is effective that other people think is complete BS, right? So it might be Aikido, Systema, the ones that they're kind of like whipping boys for the martial arts industry, and they're like, oh, that's complete bullshit. What do you think one of those that actually is effective is, though?
Awesome.
I'm curious.
Listen this week to hear what our answer is. Thanks, Eli.
Yeah, thank you.
It's funny that he asked that question because I saw an interview with Rokas with the Martial Arts Journey, and he was talking about Aikido, and he was talking with Icy Mike from the Hard to Hurt channel.
If you guys don't know, Rokas was like a really into Aikido.
He had his own school.
Yeah, he trained probably for a long time.
Yep.
Was considered high up in their system, and then he
tested it.
He tested it, and he realized that he didn't know how to fight, and
yeah,
that's a cool YouTube channel.
He pressure tested it with at an MMA gym and got whomped. And instead of holding on to like Aikido, he said that he initially tried to make Aikido functional and all this kind of stuff. Then he just left it behind and was like, okay, why would I try to make something if there's obviously things out there that are better? Why not just do this?
Yeah. And then he went and got his blue belt.
Yeah, and took a couple MMA fights, dude.
Yeah.
He's legit. He has one of the coolest martial arts channels on YouTube. But he was in that interview with Icy Mike, and Icy Mike said that Eli Knight had a very high opinion of Aikido. He said it is actually the highest form of martial arts, but it's such a pure and high form that human beings simply can't do it.
That is a hot take.
Yeah, which I find to be very funny. Well, I don't think mine is a particularly hot take, but I would say that karate, I'm just going to put like karate, that can mean a lot of different things, right? But there's a whole bunch of different styles, but I think karate gets a bad rap. And I think the issue that they tend to run into is they're kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. So, they have throws, they have their joint manipulation and joint locks, their weapon-based combatives, their basic striking with personal weapons like hands and fists. But the issue with most of them is the training modality doesn't do any type of pressure testing or any type of realistic sparring. So although they have really functional movements and they teach stuff they teach like judo throws, right? They teach a sotogare and they teach a lot of this kind of stuff, but the way that they the ridge hand. Yeah, dude. But they do all this stuff, but they're not really a master of anything. And I think I've said this on the podcast previous, but I went and got my red belt. So I trained in karate for like 6 months, and maybe it was even a little bit less than that. But anyway, regardless, there was a lot of really cool functional stuff, and the way they worked out and trained physically was very robust and difficult, and it was serious body hardening. But the issue was there was no real live sparring and live pressure testing. But if I were to not be training in like a traditional combat, I say traditional combat sport, in a combat sport like judo or jiu-jitsu or MMA, I think karate would be the first thing that I would kind of want to fall into. You know, they have things like Kyokushin out there. They do like full contact sparring to the body, and there's some problems there because they don't strike to the head and that sort of thing. But
I've trained with some Kyokushin guys.
Okay.
They're very tough.
Yeah.
And kind of similar to Muay Thai in a lot of stuff, except for the punches to the face.
Yeah.
It turns out actually a pretty important part of it.
Yeah, a very, very important part of fighting. It would seem, but yeah, I would say that karate kind of it gets a bad rap, and maybe it's deserved, but it's definitely an art that I have a soft spot for.
But so your take is that it's not the form of it's not the content.
Yes, not
it's the form.
Exactly, it's not the content itself; it's the way that it's being trained.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a hot take either, because mine is folk style wrestling. But specifically, I mean, everybody knows now that because of the UFC, everybody knows wrestling is effective. But specifically, their ground techniques, I think, are very underrated still for a lot of jiu-jitsu people. I think there's this idea, it's like, okay, well, if you're standing, then we'll borrow stuff from like wrestling and judo, but then on the ground, we'll do jiu-jitsu. But what you find, so in the rules of folk style, unlike freestyle wrestling or judo, where the bottom guy can stall out in a turtle or even like flatten out belly down to the mat, and the ref will reset them. In folk style wrestling, the bottom guy has to get up. And he actually scores an escape point if he can stand up, or a reversal point if he can reverse the position. Okay. And there are lots of moves that are taught, like the switch, the sit out, the Granby roll, the sucker drag, that personally I have found very useful. And while I'm not very good at wrestling in like the standing position, I have benefited a lot from studying a lot of these wrestling moves on the ground. And if you've ever trained with somebody who, when they get in a turtle position, their main thing is they're trying to stand up, you realize that your control in that position might not be as good as you think it is.
Gotcha.
Or same with like guys that like to wrestle up from the guard.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a paradigm. You're seeing it at the pro level, but I think at like the hobbyist level, we still have some catching up to do, and realize that there's a lot more that we could be learning from wrestling.
Yeah. I'm sure that wasn't as entertaining of an answer as Eli was hoping to provoke with that question.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I did have that thought about like Aikido. I was like, there's certain situations where maybe it like controlling someone with a wrist, like a bouncer or something like that. Or there was times I used that kind of stuff in law enforcement for pain compliance.
I was going to actually say Wing Chun for like grip fighting.
Sure.
But I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about what I know.
Ip Man's a cool movie, though.
Yeah. So let's get into it. There's a couple of directions we could go with this, but I want to start with this question, I guess you could say, of strength versus technique. And I have sort of two feelings about it. Okay. On the one hand, I think it's kind of a false dichotomy. On the other hand, I think there is, when people say something like, oh, don't use strength, use technique, they're definitely getting at something real. So let me try to break that down a little bit, and then I want to get your reaction. So I would say the reason I think it's kind of an oversimplified way of looking at things is that strength and technique are a kind of like yin and yang that work together, and it's impossible to totally separate them. The way you could think of it, like scientifically, is strength is the ability to generate force, and technique is a force multiplier. It's the understanding to apply the force in the right way at the right time.
Yeah.
On top of that, I would also say strength itself is a technique. And you'll find this if you do, like I've found this when I got into strength training, that you typically will get the first couple weeks, you'll get these crazy newbie gains.
Yeah.
And that's not so much because your muscles are becoming bigger. It's because your nervous system is starting to understand the proper way to fire muscles in order to do the task that
They call that the mind-muscle connection.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why, a guy who trains, who lifts, he might have bigger muscles, but there's something else going on when you say, okay, grab my collar and pull. His body and brain just sort of know how to connect the forearm to the bicep,
Sure.
to the lat, to the back, and all these muscles are sort of firing together in this sort of chain. And so I think strength training develops your technique because it's helping you to learn how to properly connect the pieces of your body to generate force in an effective way.
That's a very interesting take.
And a couple more points, and then I want to get your reaction. On the flip side, I would also say technique develops strength. So,
Yes.
And this is one thing I know we're both sort of a little skeptical of, like static drilling,
Yes.
or we're becoming.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some value, especially for beginners, of like do 20 arm bars from guard, because if you or I do 20 arm bars from guard, it's like a light warm up.
Sure.
But for a lot of beginners, it's like they're going to get really tired because they are learning how to like fire their hamstring to break the posture and engage their core to make an angle and all these different things. So, strength is a technique, and technique, part of having good technique is that like you are strong in those areas.
Sure.
Like, I'm not a strong guy, but I have a good arm drag, and people would say, "Oh, you feel strong in that position."
Gotcha.
Lastly, I would say I do think that there is getting at something when we talk about technique versus strength, in that a lot of big, strong guys especially can tend to over-rely on their strength and basically because they are too focused on winning rounds in the short term and not on learning in the long term, that their development suffers because they don't learn how to properly finesse things, and they get away with being sloppy in ways that don't work when you're in the super middleweight division at blue belt and you're training against a guy that is as strong as you and is more technical.
Yeah.
So.
And, I was having that experience kind of today with rolling with a newer kid who's pretty strong. And the other thing I find, the guys that rely on their strength, is like they will burn themselves out. Like they don't realize, yes, you're controlling my posture or you're controlling my head, and I can tell that you've got 30 seconds left before your arms turn to jelly, and now I'm going to turn it up on you.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that feeling.
Oh, it's so good. It is, dude. It is mwah, chef's kiss. But no, you do run into that. And I think that's a very interesting thing that you said there about the fact that strength training will help to develop kind of the mind-muscle connection. Because sometimes I think that's something I take for granted, right? When you're doing things like, a bent-over row on a barbell, and you understand how to separate, those large back muscles, and you're trying to like really fire those. That's what you're hyper focused on, making those that muscular system fire. I never really thought about the fact that would have a direct translation to jiu-jitsu in terms of body awareness. So I think that's like there, and of course now that you say it, my brain is going through all these different positions and all these different, pulls and different types of sweeps. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a direct translation of this type of lift that I'm regularly doing.
Yeah. And conversely, you've probably trained with guys before that are just kind of awkward in their movements, and they they might have like muscle mass,
Sure.
but I always think of guys with like their elbows come out away from their body a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like they probably would benefit. I'm kind of jumping ahead to what I want to talk about later, but they would probably benefit a lot from just a little bit of strength training.
Sure. Yeah. I think I take for granted the fact that I grew up doing strength training. Like, I think I started lifting weights when I was in 7th grade. And, I do find, I would say that heuristic of, hey, don't use your strength, use technique. I think that made its way into my brain to a point where I was never using what were my I don't know if innate is the right word, but I'm going to say innate physical characteristics and my physical strengths. I wasn't applying those in jiu-jitsu. I wasn't using my strength for some of these positions where I should have been. And like when I think about, okay, so no one ever says don't use your flexibility, use technique. Don't use your speed, use technique. But like strength is this thing that's kind of singled out. And I've been getting a little bit better about it, about like, you know what, this is something that I have worked towards as a martial artist, is having a strong physical ability. And so even today, right, you were saying like you felt really strong in the 2-on-1, and it's like, and you're a training partner now that I feel like we're both kind of comfortable. It's like, hey, we can turn it up a little bit here.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to allow myself to explore that more with other training partners. I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty strong in this position, because there's times where, I will be trying to work some type of sweep. I play a lot off the bottom. That's just because I spent so long getting crushed. That's where I learned to hang out. But again, my purple belt journey at this point is I really want to focus on my takedowns and my top pressure game. And I have found that I'll be hitting a sweep, and I'll be using half strength, 50% strength, and if that doesn't work, I'll just bail on it because my brain says, oh well, it didn't work. But it's like, well, you have this extra gas in the tank that you should be tapping into to make those techniques work, because you have the physical ability to make it work. And with that said, I have been spending so much of my time training in a way that doesn't rely on the strength, that I have developed really good sweeps and this kind of thing without really leaning on that physicality. Mm-hmm. But now I'm trying to incorporate the both of them, because this is also a skill that I have really fostered in my own time. So there's no reason I shouldn't be able to bring that into the mats.
Yeah. Well, I would say, to your point, I think strength is maybe unfairly stigmatized compared to other physical attributes. But again, I do think it can kind of come from a good place, in that we're sort of trying to teach people to dial back the intensity, which I think you could say should also apply to speed or other qualities that maybe like smaller guys tend to have, in order that they can just learn to move properly.
Sure.
But honestly, I think that you are sort of a good example of keeping the balance, because you're obviously like a pretty strong guy. You're not the strongest guy in our gym.
Whoa,
by
dude.
far.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah.
But, I never really feel like you're abusing that at the expense of your technique. Like your strength and your technique work together well, and I think that's the ideal.
Yeah. I think if you find that balance, it makes it for a better training session for all parties involved, right? Because not everyone out there is like, if you can physically dominate another human being, just strength, all else equal, okay, sweet, that's awesome. But it's like, especially if someone isn't as skilled as you, I think it's a good thing to kind of like tamper down the pace a little bit, or the the physicality of it, so that you both can work. And you like, those are the opportunities, right? There's some people where it's like, okay, I have to use everything I've got, right, in order just to survive. But there's a lot of guys where it's like, okay, if I were to add in the fact that I'm much more physical than this person, then the round I'm not going to be getting that much out of the round any more than they are if I'm just going to be crushing the life out of them.
And that's not what martial arts is about.
Absolutely.
Like, for those people that you are just like physically dominant over, you don't really need martial arts unless their technique is just so good that like
just
and,
impeccable.
And I do think that I do sympathize when you have like strong guys that are beginners and they're going as smaller guys that if they do take it easy, it's like, well, this guy is just going to be climbing on my back and arm barring me. So it's like, well, the only way I can even it out is just by like pulling my arm out of the arm bar with like all the force that I can. You know, and it's probably good for us small guys to get that reality check. To be like, if the guy is 50 pounds bigger than you and you don't have a gi to have that friction, like it's hard to hang on to that armbar when he's just like ripping the arm out like his life depends on it.
Yeah, I mean, those are good reminders, right? It's like, hey, I'm a purple belt and he's a white belt, but he is a physical specimen.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, but there's levels to it, right? Where they say, right, if you have two people with no, like all things equal, and then, okay, but this person's a little bit stronger. No, neither one knows jiu-jitsu. Okay, well, then that person's a little bit ahead when it comes to, the violence that would happen in between the two. But this person has a little bit more technique. So, okay, now they're starting to even out. And that run of physical attributes and your level of technique is a constant ladder. So there are times where it's like, like you were saying last time, if like, what was it, TJ Watt, is he the linebacker? Is that who I was thinking of?
He's a defense. He's a linebacker for the Steelers. Yeah.
Like a guy like that, okay, he could give a lot of black belts a hard time, right? So it's like that guy's just a physical specimen. And I just think that it's a good reminder when we have those kind of guys that come in to be able to have those kind of roles.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to shift gears and just talk about strength conditioning recovery. That's for the title of the episode, and we took some kind of informal data just from people that are listening and people that we train with about what do people regularly do. I probably should have been more diligent and kept like more accurate data on this, but just the impression that I got is that a lot of people do some kind of strength training.
Yeah.
And maybe we could sort of talk about the benefits of different forms. I kind of divided it into powerlifting, bodybuilding, kettlebells, and calisthenics, and I kind of put resistance bands in the calisthenics category.
That's fair.
It could be kind of a bodybuilding thing too, depending on how you use it. Not a lot of guys do cardio, but we have some guys that run.
Robert Bartholomew doing his first marathon.
Yeah, shout outs. I used to do a lot of cycling, and I got into swimming when I had injured my shoulder, and we'll circle back to that, but I think swimming is actually really awesome for jiu-jitsu.
Gotcha.
And then a lot of guys do foam rolling, especially older guys. Some guys do ice. We've done some ice baths.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of cold plunges, like in the Puget Sound or
that's awesome.
In mountain
Very,
lakes.
very Hickson of you.
Yeah. A lot of guys do supplements, so it's kind of a mix. Some guys don't do a whole lot. Very few people do any stretching. I probably do some of the most stretching.
Yeah, I do very limited, man. Very limited.
So, yeah, let's just talk about, I would say in general, everybody's different, age and body type, injury history. But if you're getting into jiu-jitsu, I would recommend some kind of cross-training.
Yeah, definitely.
For a combination of reasons, I think your main focus should be just injury prevention and just quality of life, because jiu-jitsu can put a toll on your body. And also it can supplement and help your jiu-jitsu. So, like I said, it depends. If you feel you're maybe a little overweight and out of shape, it might help to do some kind of cardio, whether it's hitting a heavy bag or doing a row machine or
Just lift weights faster.
if you're a skinny guy like me, hit the weights, and we'll talk about. Aaron knows a lot more about this than me, so we'll talk about the benefits of different stuff. If you just feel super stiff, do some kind of mobility, flexibility training, and really just a little bit goes a long way. If you
Totally.
train jiu-jitsu 2-3 days a week, you have another 2-3 days where you're working on your body, and I would just say be consistent. Figure out what you need to do that's just going to help you to feel better and
Sure.
to move better on the mats, and be consistent. Don't make too big a thing of it and like think that you're gonna be training 3 days a week, but then also be training like you're an athlete when you're like 32 and have a full-time job and a family and stuff.
But you can. I mean, if you want to like really adopt the jiu-jitsu, my buddy Greg over at the Endless Endeavor podcast calls it embracing the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. And when he says that, he's talking about like this holistic approach of your diet, your training regimen. All of this is there's this interplay between all that stuff you're doing off the mats. And like Cody said, not a lot of it doesn't even have to do with enhancing your abilities on the mat, although that will be a product if you choose to pick up some type of training regimen, whether that be weightlifting or even yoga or something like that. But jiu-jitsu is hard on the body. Like
I would say just stretch, don't do yoga.
Don't do yoga, just stretch them.
Yeah. It could lead to demonic possession.
Yeah, so I've heard. But if you do, you pick up some of these routines, your body's just gonna feel better. You're gonna be able to, which is gonna in turn lead to you being able to have more time on the mats without feeling like your body is completely detonated. And there's have been people that have approached me and asked me like, what do I tend to do for for my training outside of the gym? And here's what I'll say: I have my own things that I like to do, and the reason I do them in large part is because I like to do them. When you find a routine that you actually enjoy on some level, right? Working out can be kind of a slog, but it's going to keep you consistent because you're willing to do it. So if you start hearing like, oh, I heard kettlebells are the thing to be doing, but you hate swinging a freaking kettlebell, and you would way rather be doing some type of like power building or bodybuilding style workout, then just do that. Like for myself, I do a lot of power building. So it's a lot of like power lifting incorporated into a more I would call like a bro split. Like it's a standard back and bi day, a chest and tri day, legs and shoulders. And that works for me. It's something that I've been doing for a really long time. I like the aesthetics that come with that type of lifting. And then my recovery stuff.
This dude flexes in front of the mirror all the time.
I am not Preston. I do not do that. In the same thing is said about my recovery. I do like ice baths and cold plunges because I enjoy doing those things. I feel like there's a mental benefit to it. Even if someone were to tell me, it's like, well, they're not really actually doing a whole lot. There's not actually this diminishing of inflammation like all these people say.
Yeah, whatever,
like,
nerd.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. I poke him in his glasses.
Well, actually,
but the
studies have shown.
I just said I'd poke him in his glasses. I'm literally wearing a big old pair of specs right now. But it's because I enjoy doing it and I feel like there is benefit. I foam roll because I enjoy doing it to a certain extent. I should be stretching, but it's harder for me to incorporate because I just don't enjoy that aspect of recovery. And I am someone who has been doing this for a long time, and I'm just now at the ripe age of 32 learning how to get my diet in a place where it is most beneficial for me in the way I feel and the way I perform in some type of athletic endeavor. So just find something, like expose yourself to a lot of different things and pick the stuff that you enjoy doing. Just start there. And you can start adding on stuff that makes you miserable later on, but just start doing something on the off time.
Well, I just want to echo about your friend Greg's comment about the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. I meant to mention that earlier.
Sure.
But I think it's one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu because you find something that you really love and you really want to get better at it, and you start to do it all the time, and it has like ripple effects throughout your life, and people will start to take their nutrition and sleep more seriously, which is probably should have mentioned that first off. That's like probably, water, sleep, and nutrition, probably like most important things. Make sure that you're on top of that. I mean, there's better people than us you can listen to.
Sure, Mike Israel.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I remember like coming in Saturday open mat, doing like a round or two, and then just remembering like, oh, I had like 3 beers last night.
Yeah.
And it's not like I woke up super hungover, but
you can feel it.
You feel it, and so it sort of forces you to make those choices. Like, do I want to be at the bar, or do I want to feel fresh for Saturday open mat?
Yep.
And so I just think that's a great thing about jiu-jitsu, and that sort of ties into this whole show of like, jiu-jitsu is that motivating piece in your life to take better care of yourself. Sure. But let's go. I want to get into the weeds a little bit more. So let's talk about powerlifting. What do we mean by powerlifting? And maybe we'll end up like ranking these.
Sure.
But let's start with powerlifting. By that I mean focusing. You might be doing other stuff than just these lifts, but your main focus is squat, deadlift, bench press, and maybe like a strict press.
Sure, like military press.
Yeah, and trying to get those numbers as high as you can.
You're trying to move as much weight as possible, right? I often think about that. When I think about powerlifting and training regimen for powerlifting, I'm thinking high reps, low reps, high weight. So you're going for, maybe 3 reps, maybe 1 rep, right? All this kind of stuff. So, like for me, the last time I did like a strict powerlifting program, it was doing 5x5s and 6x5s, right? Mm-hmm. So what that means is I was doing 5 sets of whatever weight I could move for 5 reps, and on that 5th rep, that's all I had, and I couldn't pull out another one. So when I think of powerlifting, like you said, I would say that those are the lifts. And a lot of I'll preface it with this: that a lot of the way I think about weightlifting and the type of research I do, a lot of my brain is formulated with bro science. Right. And like,
that's fine.
Which is,
we endorse bro science.
Hell yeah. Where it's just a layman's approach, but it's worked for me, and it's worked for a lot of other guys I know that choose to train this way. But, so I would say that you hit the nail right on the head.
Well, I would say just personally, I've kind of dabbled in all of these things. I went through a phase where I was like really into powerlifting, and I kind of want to get back into it. And towards the end of this show, Aaron is going to lay out his plan for me to get my squat and my deadlift up. But I just found that, like I was saying before, it just helped me to like correct certain alignment issues. And even though when you're training powerlifting 2-3 days a week, you're kind of like always sore.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But you also like feel much better.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like I just felt like I stood up taller. I felt like in certain jiu-jitsu positions I was just more stable, less susceptible to injury. So I really think it can work wonders for people. If you're already a really big, strong guy and maybe you feel you have other areas to work on, then maybe this is not something you should be doing. But
or lean into it more.
Yeah, I mean, if you can manage it in terms of, resources and time and just physical energy, I think everybody who trains jiu-jitsu could probably benefit just from picking up a barbell, at least once a week.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree.
And then we go to bodybuilding, which is very closely related. in bodybuilding, you're focused. I mean, traditionally, it's more of an aesthetic thing, but they are working along with like the big muscle groups that you're going to hit doing powerlifting. They're working the smaller muscle groups also and doing all the different things you see bros doing in the gym, like
Curls for the girls, baby.
Just like articulating your limbs in different angles and trying to make different things pop out. I think that those kind of workouts also have great benefit for jiu-jitsu because we're very rarely able to generate force in the perfect alignment. Like powerlifting is all about learning to generate force in the angles that your body like is designed to maximally, everything sort of lining up and firing together. But we're very rarely able to do that in jiu-jitsu. A lot of times we're having to push at different angles and stuff. And I think also just from the injury prevention standpoint, if you're working your rotator cuff or you're working like your lateral hip flexors or like all these different muscles. I'm actually a big fan of tib curls.
Okay.
So I kind of picked this up from
the knees over toes
guy. He says he's like trained his tibs more than anybody else in the world.
Yeah.
And his main thing is like basketball, track and field, like sports that require a lot of explosiveness and are hard on the knees because of a lot of impact. But I think the tibs are great for jiu-jitsu because that's how you hook people with your feet.
Totally.
So, my point is in jiu-jitsu, we're using all these kind of weird little muscle groups that aren't necessarily going to be hit from the barbell practice. So I feel like probably the ideal strength training program is some combination of the two. You call it
power building.
Power building.
Yep. Yeah, power building was something I got introduced to while I was in the police department. And it was some people call it like a hard gainer workout, but the traditional bodybuilding stuff is the stuff that I primarily did when I was younger, and I still do a little bit of it now. But I try to think I'm less concerned with aesthetics, but I'm just as vain as anybody else. So aesthetics is certainly part of it. But the power building stuff, so I will do things like incorporate a heavy deadlift to start off a traditional like bodybuilding back day, right? So I'll do things like that. Or for my bench press, like I'm going to go heavy on the bench press before kind of backing it back down and going for high reps on some of the more traditional workouts. But like you said, when you're focusing on some of these smaller muscle groups and being more precise in what you're doing and just the variety of movement that comes out of it versus what we would think of as traditional powerlifting, I think that stuff for injury prevention. And when you think about things like fighting out of an armbar, right? For instance, having a good strong bicep that you've specifically trained that specific muscle, that is the movement if you're trying to muscle out of that kind of stuff, right? You're trying to hit your escapes, but having the ability to keep the flexion in your arm, right? That's a significant part of that struggle. So when you incorporate movements that more or less simulate the same thing that you're going to be seeing on the mats, it's very clear that that's going to be beneficial.
So you don't do curls for the girls, you do curls for your armbar defense.
Well, I'm married now, so yes. So my priorities have certainly changed.
Yeah. I would add too with like a lot of these bodybuilding workouts, if you don't have access to a barbell, it may be more feasible that you are able to have a home gym with dumbbells, with resistance bands, and so there's an advantage there too. Like, so me personally, I have a barbell in the shed in the backyard. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when it's cold, I'm like lazy about going out there. Yeah. But I'll do a lot of working out in front of the TV, and I have like all these.
There you go.
All these things. So there's an advantage to those type of workouts too, is that it doesn't require like that as expensive equipment.
Yeah, and there's some fun
or space.
Yeah, or like kettlebells, right? It's like you can get a lot of stuff done with a 50-pound kettlebell or steel maces. Steel mace is something that's like I've been really into, especially lately. But there's a lot of really cool, accessible equipment, and it's fun to use.
Some people, I've heard some people use just like a sledgehammer from
Sure.
Home Depot, like amazing.
Dude, that's really
So yeah, let's move
blue
on.
collar and
That
savage.
was my next category is like kettlebells. You could put maces, hammers,
Yep.
and that. So the idea with these is you're doing more dynamic type of movements. The cool thing about kettlebell, now I do kettlebells like even when I was more into powerlifting, I would still try to do kettlebells like once a week, and I just found it's really it's not as intense of a workout, but it's just a way. It's like I'm not feeling like up for a hard workout, but
Yeah.
I can kind of fire the muscles, and the workout is shorter too. It's like I can get like a good 30-minute workout, and it's a little bit of cardio also. And the idea is like, yeah, it's like more dynamic type of movements. You know, those Olympic type of lifts like snatches
Yep.
and clean and jerks are really dangerous and
Sure.
take a lot of work.
Especially if you're working out by yourself.
Yeah, and you need a proper coach, or you really need to know what you're doing. But with the kettlebell, you're doing similar types of movements with much less weight, and I just think I find them fun.
Yeah.
Personally, it's easier for me to get motivated to do a kettlebell workout than a barbell workout.
Gotcha.
Although I
Is
do
that right?
recognize, yeah.
Huh. I'm kind of surprised that you said it was more like chilled, or when you're feeling lazy, you reach for the kettlebell. I find kettlebell training to be some of the most like that'll take it out of me. And but
Interesting.
it could very well be that I'm so used to a very specific way of training that a lot of those dynamic movements, when I do it in the mirror, I will visibly, of course you see things visibly. I was about to say visibly see. I will see very clearly my instability when it comes to doing things like a
interesting.
Cossack squat or something like that, right? Or even like a standard goblet squat, and I'll be like, dang, dude, like I've got no balance here. Or like I see my knees starting to shake and buckle a little bit. So it's like when I do kettlebell, that's a much more intense training regimen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, just some of the things I like to do. I like to do single leg deadlifts.
Okay.
It's so basically you're standing, you're hinging at the hips, and one leg stays straight and kind of stays in line with your back as you hinge. So you're balancing on one leg, and it's just like a weird combination of like balance and mobility and strength. And I feel like terms of, I think it has a lot of applicability actually to like certain types of judo throws,
Sure.
as well as defending single legs, like balancing on a leg.
Yeah.
And it's just also just a great hamstring exercise, which is sort of can be a tricky muscle to target. And then like the clean and jerk and snatch type movements and swings.
Yeah.
I like to do a lot of those. Turkish get-ups, I think, are BS. That's my hot
You
take.
really?
Yeah.
But they feel so cool to do. But that's another one of those positions
They
where
can
I feel
be dangerous
really
for your shoulder.
I believe that.
And they do look aesthetic. I think people are fooled because the Turkish get-up movement looks a lot like a technical stand-up
Yes.
that we do in Jiu-Jitsu. And so I think people are fooled into thinking that it has applicability for Jiu-Jitsu, but I'm convinced that's kind of BS.
Gotcha. I think that's I'd be willing to hear you out on that for sure. I think that for me, what the kettlebell and the steel mace allows me to do is a lot of like this lateral movement, like side to side swings where you're having this twisting of the spine. And there has been people that I heard someone, it was Pat McNamara, and he said, you know, a lot of people are afraid of doing these kind of workouts because they think that they're going to hurt their spine or hurt their back. And he's like, no, the reason you hurt your back is because you're not training in this way. Like you're not allowing for this type of flexion and this type of mobility in the back and spine for this kind of like explosive power.
Yeah.
That's just, so when your body gets put into a position, especially in like jiu-jitsu, and it's never really been there before, then that's when the injury happens. But if you're routinely training that sort of thing, then that structure is going to be more solid when it's tested.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the overall kind of tension or dialogue within strength training is like, do we train our muscles in the movement patterns that are the strongest, or should we train more where we're the weakest?
Sure.
And I think it's probably should be a combination of both. But
Yep.
a lot of the more like cutting edge injury prevention type training that, you know, guys like knees over toes guy is really promoting. Tom Brady was like really big into this type of training. Has to do with like putting, you know, dialing the weight, the resistance way down, but then training in those awkward positions so that you're building up strength where you're naturally weak, because
Gotcha.
that's where injuries
Sure.
are most likely to happen. And then lastly, I've got calisthenics.
Okay.
I don't do a ton of calisthenics, but I'm a big fan of pull-ups, and I've been doing deficit push-ups a lot, and those are awesome. Like way to hit your
Deficit
chest.
push-up is where you're like you're elevated on your hands, right? So you can go deeper into that press.
So your chest goes below your hands at the bottom of the push-up.
Yeah, I don't really do a whole lot of calisthenics. I think that it's probably I don't know. That's a kind of a high rep thing in order to get what you want to get out of it, right? And so for me, I don't know. Maybe I'm just wimpy about it, but I like the idea of going out and doing a set of 5 heavy squats versus doing 50 air squats, or doing a heavy set of bench press versus doing. I mean, I do my fair share of push-ups, but doing, you know, sets of 50 push-ups. Calisthenics, but again, it's one of those things that can be done anywhere. So that's but it's like stretching, right? It's like, hey, dude, if you're gonna sit down and watch TV, you might as well on your commercial break bust out 50 push-ups or whatever. Yeah, and the same
50?
thing with like stretching. Well, yeah, I mean 50 for me for sure.
Well, I agree with you, but I would say the exception is pull-ups.
Yeah,
I almost put pull-ups in like the powerlifting category.
I
I feel like it's one
old
of those major movements, and actually, as we move on in terms of into my strength training plan, my goals is squat 225, deadlift 315, and I want to be able to do 12 pull-ups.
12 pull-ups straight.
To me, I think those are like the 3 compound movements that I'm sort of drawn to.
Sure.
And I favor the pull-up much over the bench press or the strict press personally.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've become more in love with the pull-ups since getting a rack out in my garage and having an actual pull-up bar, because it wasn't something that I was doing very often, because I would just go, okay, let's go do the lat pull down instead over on the, hit it on the machine or whatever. And then what you find is if you start doing pull-ups and you haven't been doing them, you can start to get good at them, and that feels good, where it's like, oh, I'm able to pull myself up here, and it doesn't feel like this huge thing. You get your chin up above the bar, and you're like, I feel like I could sit up here for a little bit and move around a little bit, and I find that
a lot of people can't do like a pull-up.
Yeah, I honestly did not know that until relatively recently.
And a lot of people can't do. Maybe they could do a pull-up, but they would struggle to do 5 pull-ups.
Sure.
So I just think it's, I don't know, like you said, there's something very satisfying about it, and it's quite more complex a movement than you realize.
Yeah.
Once you get into it, because you kind of need to use your whole body so that you don't like swing and lose a bunch of energy.
Yeah, and it's a pretty robust workout, because there's a lot of different variations, right? From like, okay, you can do wide grip, close grip, underhand, all that kind of stuff. So I think it is something. And if you can't do a pull up, just start off with crying.
Saltar.
Yeah, start off with crying yourself to sleep. No, but if you get up on a pull up bar, put your chin above the bar. If you have to step on a chair or whatever, and then just hold yourself with your chin above the bar. Yeah. And if you can't do that, start with bar hangs.
I'll do a lot of that anyways too. Like I'll usually my pull up workout is I'll do like 4 or 5. So I'm not maxing out.
Sure.
But like sort of some fraction of my max out, and then hold that last one and then release slowly.
Yeah. And you set some realistic goals for yourself, right? It doesn't have to, if you're just getting into weightlifting, you don't have to start off being like, okay, I want to be able to bench press 225 right out the gate. Like maybe to start off like, okay, I want to be able to bench my body weight or I want to be able to bench 135 pounds for 5 reps, whatever it may be. If you set yourself some like achievable goals, you'd be shocked at how motivating that can be. So the first time you break that first goal and you're like, oh shoot, okay, well I guess it's time to reset and figure out what I want to be able to do next. And just if anyone out there doesn't have some type of training regimen or plan outside of hitting the mats, I would strongly encourage you to figure something out. And we have, the internet is just replete. Is that the word I'm looking for? It's just, it's flooded with
so many
information.
resources.
Yeah, there's so many resources out there. You can literally learn from some of the best minds in the world that are much more technically knowledgeable than either I or Cody. So yeah, I would strongly encourage you guys to pursue something in that way.
So just quickly, I do want to get to our last segment, but I just had a couple things I want to cover real quick. Cardio, generally pretty hated. It almost seems like there's cardio guys, and then there's guys that do every other type of physical activity. There's like guys that just love running or cycling or whatever, and then there's guys that play sports or lift weights or
yeah, but you know what is a huge insult? If someone were to tell you you have a runner's body, okay? So it's like, I think that's like, cardio's lame, dude. If you're not and this is, okay, I'm kind of saying all this tongue in cheek, but you really should prioritize strength training. If you have to pick one or the other, there's so many studies, there's so much information out there for why straight up strength training is going to be better for longevity.
Yeah, it builds your body up, whereas running too much seems to break you down.
Yeah, there's just a lot of information out there that really solidifies the fact that if you're going to get into something, strength training is the way to go to start off.
I would say, just to give a little bit of pushback, when you start jiu-jitsu, it's like a cardio workout in and of itself.
Yes.
As you improve, it can be difficult because you can be lazy and over-rely on your I mean, we talked earlier about guys over-relying on strength, but you can over-rely on your technique to where you can rest in certain positions. And sometimes it's not over-relying. Sometimes you get the stubborn, really strong white belt, and you achieve mount, and you're tired, and the correct play is give him a lot of shoulder pressure and rest in that position.
Sure.
So it's not like you're being lazy. That's part of jiu-jitsu is managing your energy in the fight.
But as you start to recognize when you should be doing that, you're going to have more opportunity to rest inherently, right?
Yes.
So it's like,
and so I do think, especially if you're going to compete, I think a little bit of, running hills or, if you have a 6-minute match, like doing 6 minutes on the row machine, whatever it is. Honestly, shadow wrestling is one of the craziest. Like, you will be shocked if you're just like, okay, I'll just be in my stance, move around, feint, maybe shoot every now and then, sprawl every now and then. Try to do that for a 5 or a 6 minute round, and you'll be dead.
Yeah. No, I totally believe that.
I think a little bit, especially if you're competing, can help. But I do agree with Aaron. It's sort of at the bottom of all those things. So would you? I mean, personally, I kind of would rank those 5 things
the way you read it out. I would agree.
Powerlifting, bodybuilding, kettlebells, calisthenics, and cardio.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Lastly, let's just lightning round. Can we rank ice baths, foam rolling, and stretching?
Okay, this is all personal
for recovery.
Yeah. Ice baths is number 1 for me. I thoroughly enjoy ice baths. I've been doing it for almost a year now, usually 2 to 3 times a week, although I've been kind of out of it the last probably 2 weeks. But that is it's been such a good part of my routine that that's certainly my number 1. And then what were the other 2?
Foam rolling and stretching. Foam rolling could include any kind of self-massage.
I would put stretching above foam rolling.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'd use my foam roller more than I stretch. But I think that I probably enjoy stretching more than foam rolling. Foam rolling is just easy to be lazy when you do.
Interesting.
Right?
See, I put foam rolling number 1.
Oh.
I think if you have tight muscles, it's just you got a target that you got to suffer. You got to put some pressure on that tight muscle and just suffer.
Prioritize the pain,
and
baby.
Feel some pain, and that's the best way to release that. It's hard for me to rank the other two. I mean, I stretch a lot more than I do ice.
Yeah.
But no, ice is number 2. Ice is awesome.
Ice is awesome.
It's partly just because it's such a mental fight.
Yeah.
And like you really have to like find the courage to just, feel like you're dying and then overcome it. It's really an amazing.
It doesn't matter
experience.
how many times you've done an ice bath or cold plunge. Your body and your brain will say, just don't do it this time.
Yeah.
Just like, let's not do it this time.
And similar to competition,
Yeah.
the anticipation is worse than
Totally.
the actual experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, like it's but yeah, then foam rolling last.
Tight. Well, real quick, maybe I don't know if 5 minutes is enough time to go into this.
Yeah,
but
so
how do I hit my goals?
Cody wanted me to come up with a regimen for him to be able to up his squat and his deadlift. And so me and my dad, we had a summer where he was training for the police and fire games to do bench press. And so, of course, I wanted to follow along with that. And that summer, I benched 315 pounds for 1 rep. And the way that we went about doing this, it was a 12-week program. And I should have brought my notebook as far as the notes. But so the way the program more or less works is you're going to take your first workout of week 1 is just figuring out where you're at. What is your 1 rep max? And there's these calculations that you can do in order to kind of sort that out. So if you have an idea, okay, I think it's going to be somewhere around here. It's like, okay, here's your warm up. It's going to be 30% of what you think your max is, then a 50% for low reps, right? That's how you're going to do it. And then once you establish your 1 rep max, it all comes down to percentages. So you have a squat day, you'll have a deadlift day, and you really have to kind of figure out what your body is going to allow you to do. Some people can do it for 4 to 5 days. Some people, it's like, okay, I can do these lifts 3 days, maybe 2 days. Where
A week, you mean?
a week, yes.
Okay.
So like 1 week, it'll be like, okay, I'm going to do my heavy squat day, and then maybe take a day off, then to do my heavy deadlift day. And then maybe I'll do my heavy squat day again right after that. You really just have to kind of figure out what your body's going to be okay with and allow you to do, because there's overlapping muscle groups with both these lifts, right? But a lot of it just comes down to percentages. So it's going to be like, okay, for your set on this squat day, you're going to do your warm-up set, and then it's going to be 70% of what your 1 rep max is for 5 reps 5 times, right? So you're going to do something like that. And then the additional workouts you will do.
You're working your way up to 5x5s.
Yes.
At 70%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. And then you just keep on bumping it up from there.
Ratcheting it up.
Then at about the 4.5 week mark, you're going to do.
And is that by feel? Like, do you ratchet up like that was a much easier 5 reps than it was last week? So
yeah.
add 20 pounds to the bar?
There's a couple. People will say different things. Some people will say, well, just like if you feel like you can do more, then just freaking do more. But there's other people that say, no, stick with this program. There's a reason that this is all stuff
so it's on a schedule.
Yes, this has been utilized a lot. This is not something that I came up with. This is something that was just like something that was accepted in the industry as being a type of program to get these kind of lifts up. So it's all going to be percentage based. And then you'll do these check-ins. So like at the halfway mark, okay, let's see, you're going to take 2 days off before this lift to see what your 1 rep max is, and see if it's changed at all, and then you kind of go from there.
You do that how often?
To check in, I think for that program, it's like it's going to be at the 5 week mark, the 9 week mark, and then again at the end of the program. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Pretty
awesome.
straightforward.
Well, I have not just you holding me accountable, but all of our listeners too, so
now you have to say. So what is your goal right now?
Bench 225,
Yep.
Deadlift 315, and then the 12 do 12 straight pull-ups.
Yep.
But that's sort of, I kind of know how.
Yeah,
I have my own pull-up workout. So
there's a route for that. Okay, well, so next week, this is going to be a fun conversation, I think. I feel like we've been doing some episodes lately that have been kind of technical, and maybe some guys out there's like, okay, well, what about, let's get back to the martial arts movies and the funny accents and stuff. So next week, what I wanted to talk about was the stereotypical personalities in martial arts and the type of people we come across.
Great.
Because this is a hobby that brings out some characters.
Yeah.
And no matter where you go, if you talk with other martial artists, you'll be able to kind of drop jokes that people are in on because they've met that kind of person, even if you're two totally separate schools. It's just kind of how the game goes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Great idea.
I think that's going to be it. Anyway, guys, that brings us to the end of episode number 9 of the Grappler's Dilemma podcast. If you want to reach out to us, we have an Instagram. That Instagram is The Grappler's Dilemma. I check it every day. Send us messages, post on our stuff. Help us out with the algorithm to get more eyeballs on this stuff and get more people indoctrinated into the world of jiu-jitsu. We also have an email that we check from time to time, but nobody really seems to utilize it. It's at the Grapplers. It's not at. It is The Grappler's Dilemma podcast at gmail.com.
I just want to say we would love show idea recommendations.
Yes, please.
Because we're running out of ideas.
Yeah, we're only so smart, okay? We didn't think that we were going to last this long. We need more people. Oh, and be on the lookout. Me and Cody have also started a secondary YouTube channel called Dilemma Combatives, in which we will be presenting more or less instructionals on some of our favorite techniques. And
also, I would say my vision of it is really trying to help beginners that sort of feel lost in the sea of techniques.
Because there's a ton.
Yeah.
And so we did like a short video today that's going to have some pretty good fundamental principles on when it comes to guard and understanding that position. And, next week or sometime this week, I'll be recording some stuff on some gi techniques that I enjoy doing. And then we'll start bringing in some additional, like, real-world combative stuff, like street fight techniques, things for the street. And, it'll just be kind of a fun time, so keep an eye out for that. And as always, thank you guys, anyone who has downloaded and listened to this or shared it, liked our stuff. It's been incredibly humbling, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of you. We just hit our 120th download, which is pretty crazy to think about. That's it's pretty freaking awesome. Anyway, guys, get out there, keep training, stay safe.
Us.